RNN.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means.
Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. Tonight's featured show is Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. Welcome to the Republic News Network for our live national broadcast. You may call me Kelby, and tonight I'm going to be acting as your moderator. The RNN, which stands for the Republic News Network, has been doing this radio show since 2010, and it's always been a friendly introduction for the people of the United States Corporation. Here we go. It's true. The United States is a federal corporation, and their exclusive jurisdiction is in the District of Columbia. The Republic government was simply a bunch of U.S. citizens that in law don't have access to the Bill of Rights, and they realized they wanted to be Americans as our founders and our law provided each and every one of us. See, we've been hard at work since 2008, and since 2010, we have successfully re-inhabited the original government vacated under Lincoln in 1861. I know, it's hard to understand. Don't worry. We are law-abiding, peaceful Americans and very pro-government, and we love our country. You can consider the Republic members are tired of the corruption that we see every day. See, we found in the law that there is two forms of government here on the land, and we did something about it. We are people. Mothers, fathers, sons, daughters. We have families just like you. We simply found some truths, and now we're sharing these important truths with the rest of the world. So get ready to hear things that sound amazing, and get ready to understand that you too are about to be a part of history. We welcome each one of you to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel and your Republic if you so choose. But before we go into our broadcast tonight, please bow your head in prayer.
Father, we want to thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts for the opportunity to spread truth and give information to people to make their own minds up as to what needs to happen. Lord, bless the people on the call, protect them, and bless Dan Happel. We thank you for all that you're doing in this country right now. We thank you for the leadership, and we hope, Lord, that you protect them. In your son's name, we pray. Amen. Mr. Happel, I yield the floor to you, sir.
A month and a half ago, and he was on with Donna Fiducia, and they spoke somewhat about the deep state that we are in right now. Talked a little about the Clinton Foundation, but we have a special guest on tonight, and that is Kathleen Willey. And Kathleen is, I think a lot of our listeners would recognize her name, is a lady who was really one of the strongest supporters of the Clintons as in the run for the presidency, was a major fundraiser for their campaign. And Kathleen was she felt that she was a close friend of the Clintons. And when her husband was having some emotional issues, she went to the president, and she found out the wrong side of Bill Clinton, the side that I think a lot of people recognize now that have known the Clintons for some time. But Kathleen is a very special lady. She has been literally through hell because of the Clintons and the Clinton connections, and as a result, I think she's probably got a better view of what the Clintons are than many people in this country who are also very close to that presidential pair. So with that said, Charles and Kathleen, I welcome you to this week's Connecting the Dots radio show. And let's start with maybe a little bit of a brief background on each of you for our listeners from your perspective. Charles, would you like to start that off?
Oh, no. Ladies first.
Okay. Fair enough. That sounds good. Kathleen, would you like to be our first guest to speak, please?
Yes, that's fine. Good to be here, Dan. Thank you.
What about you, Kathleen?
Well,
yeah,
you covered most of it. The one thing that I think you got wrong is I went to see President Clinton because my husband was having financial problems, not emotional problems. And he was, he got himself in a pretty tight spot. And I had been a stay-at-home mom, and I had to go to work. I needed to get a job and get us out of this pickle that we were in. And so my first thought was, I'd worked for the Clintons for so long, and I was at the time working at the White House. I thought, as a volunteer, I wasn't being paid, and I made an appointment to go see the president and asked for his help and told him a little bit about what was going on. And the whole meeting didn't turn out well. He tried to take advantage of me, and as you've heard all of the stories. And after that, the next day, sadly, my husband, we discovered that he had committed suicide, and so it's been quite a ride since then. I had a lot of financial problems, and bottom line is I never got a job with the White House. I stayed there for a while. I had a part-time job, and when that was up, they promised me another one, and I never got it. So, I was intimidated and threatened when I became a witness in Paula Jones's case, and that's when I found out exactly who the Clintons are and what they do to people who, at whatever point in their lives, can do them harm. And I could have done them harm. And like Juanita, what happened with Juanita and Paula and numerous other women. And she enabled his behavior, and he just continues to go on and do what he's doing. It hasn't changed.
No, I'm sure you're right about that. Absolutely. Charles, would you like to give a little bit of your background, because you've got a very interesting background from a financial perspective, and so you've got an ability that a lot of people don't have to be able to really read the finances behind the Clinton Foundation.
Well, thank you very much for having me on, and it's a pleasure to be on with you and also with Kathleen. So I am somebody who started on Wall Street in June of 1980, coming out of business school, and managed to have about a 20-plus year career, various places, working on enormously complex transactions all over the world. To do that, you really have to have a training, not really as an accountant, but as somebody who can see beyond the balance sheets, the income statements, to understand what's going on in the industry that drives performance in a company, or for that matter now with a charity. And I was fortunate to be able to retire young in 2002, took some time off. By 2007, I saw the financial crisis coming. I got back into the media, or at least in the media eye, warning that General Electric Company was far more shaky than most people thought. And GE is, I'm not bragging, but it's just far more complicated and much larger than the Clinton Foundation. And that led me to think about some other companies that I thought were not reporting their financial conditions properly while they were encouraging people to trade in their securities. And back in 2015, somebody came to me and said, I really can't figure out this Clinton Foundation. And so my ears perked up, and I thought, well, why don't I try to learn a little bit about it? And the rest, I think, is history.
Well, you've certainly done a lot of background on the Clinton Foundation, and I would say at this stage of the game, you're probably the preeminent investigator into the financial, let's say, machinations of the Clinton Foundation. So I think we'll have a very interesting discussion this evening. One of the things I'd like to start the program with, though, are the events of the past several months between the mainstream media and the fledgling Trump administration. And it shows how far we've moved to the left as a nation and how committed the media is to the socialist, globalist agenda for the future of America. Would you like to maybe let our listeners hear what your perspectives are on that as this has progressed along since we had our last discussion?
Sure. Again, ladies first.
Oh, Charles.
Unless you want me to.
I don't know where to go with this.
All right, I can help you out. I'll start,
yeah.
and then I'll let
you are the expert on the foundation. I'm the expert on the Clintons personally.
Right.
So you can. Well, I know a lot about what you've been doing in trying to help you. You certainly know more than I do.
Well, I think Dan's question though had more to do with the journalistic coverage. About which you have a lot more experience about fake news.
Yeah, they just have a double standard. They like today. I mean, nobody ever knows, but I know that I was certainly attacked and degraded, and I mean, it was horrible, terrorized, threatened, and the problem was that the liberal media was against me too, and they tried everything they could to scare me. They tried everything they could to make me look like a liar and an opportunist, and it just went on and on and on, and it continued for 20 years. And they've done the same thing to Juanita, and they've done the same thing to Paula, and I think that there are other women out. I know there are other women out there that had the same kind of problem with him. There are many, many more of them, and I just think, I mean, for instance, we have this problem today, as we speak, with all of the charges against Bill O'Reilly. And, the mainstream media is going after him like there's no tomorrow. But where were they when we needed them? I mean, Maxine Waters is saying that he ought to go to jail. Well, Bill Clinton should have gone to jail. He should have been there a long time ago. I mean, he raped a woman. And the mainstream media just continues to make up fake news. They continue to cover for the Clintons. Hillary's trying to get back into the picture again, and they're covering her heavily. And this is just what they do. I will never be able to figure it out. I learned a long time ago. I learned the hard way. I will not do any interviews or any television appearances with anybody in mainstream media, because I know it's a setup. And I had it happen to me before, and it was bad. It was hard. So I stay away from them. And I think that they are slowly, I think people are really realizing that they are basically they're all leftists. They cover they covered for the Clintons, they covered for Obama, and anybody that goes against them, or anybody has anything bad to say about them, like I did, or accuse him of what he's guilty of, certainly guilty of, they just tore us apart. And we're going through the same thing now. I think it's even worse.
I think it is worse.
You can't get any. You don't know what to believe. You don't know who to believe. I mean, it never ends. And anything that comes out of this White House, the mainstream media just jumps on them and goes against them in lockstep.
No, they do. And the thing that I want our listeners to appreciate is that you were a lifelong committed Democrat.
Absolutely.
Prior to your encounters with the Clinton administration, you were committed to the Democratic ideal. And,
raised a lot of money. Yeah, raised a lot of money for the Clintons. Yeah.
Yeah, and well, it just shows how I guess your epiphany is really the same epiphany that our entire country is starting to go through right now, and I think that is manifest with the election of President Trump.
Oh, certainly. I mean, the country spoke, and they just are sick and tired of it all. And the thing of it is here comes Hillary again, and you know, I'm convinced that she's going to run again. I really am.
Well, I don't think she ever quit running, to be real honest with you.
Yeah, she'll stop running when she stops breathing, is the way I look at it. And she just, I think she's gearing up for another campaign. The woman just doesn't get it. I just don't understand. I really don't. And I hope that the Democrats don't let that happen again. You would think that they would say enough. And if you've been on the stage long enough, move on.
Well, you know, I hate to say it, but I think the Democrat Party has gone now so far left and so far to the globalist socialist perspective that I think the Democrat Party is lost, and quite frankly, I think a large part of the so-called establishment Republican Party has picked up a lot of those same progressive tendencies. Charles, would you like to maybe weigh in on this now?
Sure. So on the question of fake news and Kathleen's experience contrasted to now, what's happened is that the internet and the power of what we're doing now on cell phones and with modern technology is really significant. So back in the 90s, when Bill started out in his first presidency, early 90s, the mainstream media really did have enormous power to filter, and present to the public what was real and what wasn't real, and the mainstream media was actually, in the financial terms, very valuable. But what's happened since then is first with Craigslist, which took those classified ads and took them for free and took them out of the newspapers, and then later with the internet that unblocked the monopoly that the mainstream had on dealing with the public. The economic condition of the mainstream is in desperate shape. It has a lot of debt. You can look at the financial statements, even of Rupert Murdoch's company. Most of these large media conglomerates, and even the smaller ones, have a lot of debt. They don't have much behind them. They have employees, they have retirees they have to pay for, unions they have to deal with. It's a horrible business model, whereas what you're doing and what many other people are doing in new media is really catching fire. So I actually am quite optimistic about all this. I mean, I think that it's not like when you look back, whether you're a Republican, Democrat, or Independent, at this millennium, starting in, say, 2000, end of 2000 forward, it's not like you can say, you know what, America has really done a fantastic job geopolitically. The world is a safer place, and America's position is a lot more secure. Republicans and Democrats have screwed that up for us, Obama in particular. You can't look at the finances of the government and the country and say, oh, we are so rich, because the assets on the asset side of the balance sheet have been puffed up by coordinated central bank activities, suppressing interest rates. It's all an illusion of prosperity. Real people, the bottom 80% of this country, have no financial wealth. Very few of them have any kind of a buffer. We're aging. And I think what has been happening is that, and I see this actually in my discussions, particularly with progressives. I'm on the progressive radio quite a bit. And, they see a lot of this. They don't like the deep state. They don't like unregulated markets, an FDA that's out of control, an SEC that's out of control. People are searching for a new approach. They're tired of what I think we all call the uniparty. Regional affiliations don't work beyond a national country. Globalism certainly doesn't work. And I think we're in a very vital moment now. And, Kathleen's been quite modest so far. We're going to get her to talk a little bit more. But, I think the role that she and Juanita and Paula Jones and Kathy Shelton played in the second debate, where the mainstream media was ambushed by Donald Trump at a time when the mainstream was trying to make hay out of, entertainment rumors from way back when. I think the public really, particularly the millennials and people maybe who are 30 years old who didn't have the knowledge of what Kathleen and her sisters went through the last time Bill was anywhere near the White House. I think that was perhaps one of the most significant moments in the 2016 campaign. And it happened early enough for people on the fence to, sitting there and think about it. And you say, you know what? We don't want Bill Clinton back in the White House for many reasons. One of them is, what would happen to our daughters and take your daughter to work to hit the White House? I mean, it was just, and I think that really resonated. And thank you, Kathleen. I know a little bit of the backstory on it, and thank you for dropping everything and change your life around to be there for that meeting, because I think it made a big difference.
I do too. I think since then, when I'm out shopping or out in public, I've had numerous people stop me and thank me and thank the other women for what we did, and that we were how brave and courageous we were. And it's funny, I've never considered myself that. What I've thought about was the whole time that this is just the right thing to do, and I'm infuriated when I see these stories of women that are sexually harassed and raped and discriminated against, and they can't find any support anywhere. But if Republican women, but if you're a Democrat, you're entitled to do anything. You're entitled to sexually harass women and rape women and. Look at Hillary. The one thing that was so ironic is that she's talking about equal pay for men and women. Well, she paid the women in her campaign less than she paid the men in her campaign. I mean, talk about hypocritical. And it just seems to be, a losing battle. No matter how often you try, and I really am just infuriated and disgusted with the Democrats because they have just expose themselves for the hypocrites that they are. I mean, not one of them supported me when that happened with me. And I've worked tirelessly for the Democratic Party on the state level, on the local level, and then on the national level. And we raised untold amounts of money for the Clintons. And boy, when that happened to me, not one person on the local level, not one Democrat on the state level, all these people that I had raised money for and arranged fundraisers for, and then especially all the Democrats up in the House and the Senate, not one single one of them came and defended me. Not one of them came to my aid. Not one of them did. And I was flabbergasted. I mean, that just goes to show you how naive you can be, and at least how naive I was. And it's just, I think the thing that bothers me more than anything, besides all that, and I think Charles has talked about this too, is that it's the fact that we've lost our standing in this world. I mean, when Obama was president, he was just a joke. I mean, all the world leaders thought he was a joke. And I was invited to 2 world summits in 1995, and when things were different. It was before 9/11, and I was in a position as a public member with these delegations that I could sit in on bipartisan discussions with other world leaders and with the head of the people of our delegation, and I was so struck by the fact everybody wanted our money. That was the first thing I noticed. But everything, we were held in such high regard by the leaders of the world, and I saw all of it right before my very eyes. It was funny because one day, within 5 minutes of each other, I met Fidel Castro and shook his hand, and then Nelson Mandela and shook his hand. And I just thought, this is unbelievable. It just was such a moment for me. But to have been at those world summits and to have witnessed how the world felt about us was a great honor for me. And because, I love this country. I always have, and I always will. And I hate to see what's happening to it. And I really think that President Trump is trying to change that image and make us strong again, just like he said. And the Democrats are just determined he's not going to do it.
Well, that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about tonight too, is what's known as a deep state government inside the Beltway, and how the political holdovers from the Obama administration are doing everything possible to stop President Trump from reasserting national sovereignty and America First policies. Charles, could you give us a little bit of your perspective on that, and then we'll have Kathleen give us her perspective.
Sure. I mean, I think if you think back over the period, and I happen to remember the date just because it fell on my birthday, on January 11th, 1989, Ronald Reagan gave his farewell speech to the nation. And it's online, and you can read it for yourselves and consider it. But, Ronald Reagan was truly a great president, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. The last 2 years of his term, there was trouble for him with Iran-Contra, and I think the mix of the Senate or the House change. I forget what it was exactly. But he inherited, and Trump has got a mess, but Reagan had an unparalleled mess. We were still in a Cold War, maybe even a hot war with the Soviet Union. Europe was a mess. Interest rates were a mess. Oil prices were higher. Government was out of control. Jimmy Carter and his feckless bunch of, frankly, excuse me for saying it this way, but complete idiots posing as, cabinet members had gotten this country into a mess. And Reagan didn't start with control of the House and the Senate. Both. I mean, he had to face down Tip O'Neill, and he got a lot of stuff through with his charm and adroit skill, even though he wasn't, he had been in politics, but he wasn't a lifelong politician. And, then I was, frankly, though I worked for somebody who was in Reagan and H.W.'s cabinet and Treasury Secretary, worked fairly closely with him, I was enormously disappointed with H.W. Bush, shattered by Bill Clinton, hopeful about W. Bush, but then quickly disillusioned with him. And, of course, now we've had Obama. So you go back, we have almost now we have close to 30 years.
30 years. Mm-hmm.
Off course, at a time when the Soviet Union had been vanquished, at a time when communist China was really not much of a force in 92. India was nothing in 1992. And, we have a great hand in this country, and it's been misplaced. So along the way, you think about the greatest generation, 1941 to 1945 fighters in World War II. My dad, who's still alive, was one of them in the Navy. And, many Americans sacrificed it all. Families stood together. Republican, Democrat differences didn't matter. When you look in financial terms, the scope of the sacrifice that we made as a nation to fight back and then destroy and expunge the ideologies that animated the hate, destruction, wanted desecration that occurred around the world. We did all that in 4 years. We've been fighting this supposed global war of terror for 16 years. And now as we speak on this broadcast, there's rumors that maybe we're going to go and do something swift in Syria once again. We're not remembering what happened in Iraq with, the weapons of mass destruction. We had assurances they were there in Iraq and Saddam was going to use them. Now we're sure that, the Assad government was behind this thing. I'm not so sure of that. One thing I am sure of is that there are Russian troops on the ground, Russian munitions on the ground in Syria, and American troops in small number. This is not like toppling Gaddafi or even Saddam Hussein. This is a very dangerous moment, and we've been at this war for 16 years. We've got obviously it's horrible, the people who were killed. In some ways it's even worse, the people who are so grievously wounded and their families and the concern about all this. Shouldn't we be asking ourselves, what in the heck are we trying to accomplish here? Why have we spent 16 years on this project? What constitutes victory? Do we really want to fight Russia? Or do we have, a common enemy that we should be fighting together? And then we should be thinking about who stands to benefit: the defense contractors. I know it's not related to the war, but the big pharmaceutical companies, Kathleen's dog, big finance companies. These are all entities that are not really regulated. And it's, the people in this country and our allies we need to bring a better balance between the mainstream families, maybe those who are listening to this broadcast, who like Reagan encouraged you to do, sit around a kitchen table or a dinner table and actually talk as families and communities. What is in our interest? Why have things gone so wrong for so long? Why can't these politicians, when they screw up, be bounced out of office? Why do they stay there forever?
Right.
Why do they never pay for any of their mistakes? So I think this country is thirsting for the kind of steps forward that Donald Trump wants to take with his team. But because it's such a big challenge, and because, make no mistake, the Bush wing of the Republican Party is tooth and nail, never Trumper. I thought their performance, it'd be one thing if Bush 1 and Bush 2 had covered themselves in glory, but to basically be neutral to negative on Trump was disgraceful. Even recognizing that Trump, excuse my language, whooped Jeb's keister. Nonetheless, the notion, the rumor floating around from the Bush wing that they might have been happy to have the Clintons back in the White House. They had their heads examined.
Well, it's the progressives against the people that really believe in American sovereignty, and the progressives. And what you're alluding to is that for basically the last 30 years, instead of making America first, we have a political body, and it's both wings, really both parties, that are more concerned about spreading our wealth to the rest of the world at our expense and creating this one world socialist utopia that they envision. And we've gone from being a national republic that stood on great principles to being more or less the policeman of the world, and that's kind of where we're at right now.
Well, if I could just jump in, and I hesitate to correct you on your own show, but I don't think it's the progressives that we should be worried most about. I actually think it's the globalists, the corporatists. And
well, actually, I when I say that term, Charles, I consider them both, the progressives and the globalists, to be one and the same.
No, because what I would say to you is that and I'm not saying I'm a progressive, right? But I have had in the last year, I've probably been on this progressive radio network dealing with various hosts and audience call-ins and all this kind of stuff. There is a wing, yes, in the progressive, in the so-called radical left-wing group. Yes, there are people about whose social issues we're not going to agree about, right? But there are important elements in that group who are very much against corporate fraud, who are very much against the global world order, who are very much against the deep state. And there's a lot of common interest, a lot more than you would think. I found anyway, and I live actually. I live in the center of the progressive universe here in the West Village in Washington, here in Manhattan. And I'm not. It's not
He's
that I'm
one
all
man against the world. Where I can't believe where he lives.
But the point is, I get into in my daily interactions. I meet strangers. I'll get into conversations, and I talk to these people, and I'm just amazed at how much common interest we do have. Both people, conservative people like us economically, and some are open-minded, some not so open-minded socially. That group has a lot more in common with certain elements of the progressive side, the disillusioned side, the millennials, than we both do with the lobbyist slime that live in the biggest swamp in the history of mankind in Washington, D.C. So I'm actually a little more hopeful.
Well, that's great.
Well, speaking of American sovereignty, they just broke into the programming and said that we have launched Tomahawk missiles against Syria.
Oh my goodness.
Well,
you were talking,
ladies and gentlemen, we're going to break for just a few minutes here to give our sponsors an opportunity to speak about the Republic. But we will continue this conversation, and Kathleen, I'd love to hear your comments on this globalist perspective as well. So we'll take a short break, and we will be right back.
A story of a common family. So my daughter asked me a very important question. She said, Dad, why do you work so hard on this republic? And I answered her, well, baby, the republic as given by our founding fathers is the most important form of government ever given to man. She said, Dad, why don't you let somebody else do it? I said, well, sweetheart, most of America thinks things are okay. And so long as their lives are not upset, they don't have to care about the important things that are taking place in their own country. Your dad likes to do things. I just don't want to sit and wait for somebody else. And if we didn't have our founding fathers, we wouldn't have this country. They were doers. They wanted something great for their children and grandchildren. And sweetheart, so do I. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish I could say that that's what happens in almost every home of our country, but it's not. Just 8 years ago, as a man who watched an $800 billion bailout given to banks when that money could have paid off every home in foreclosure in this country, which would have resulted in the banks getting the money anyway, I realized that we had a problem. And I stood up and I did something about it. I'm asking you to do something about it. I'm asking you to not just listen to these phone calls. I'm asking you to go to republicfortheunitedstates.org and read the Declaration of Sovereign Intent. Understand what we have done over the last 8 years. Understand what our intention is, what we are desiring to do for the people of this nation, and do something about it. Participate in the phone calls. Participate in building your states. Participate in finding a governor, finding a leader, finding the body politic of people that are going to stand up and build the de jure state. This is what we need. We need you to do something about it. We need you to be doers. Wednesday night of every week, we have a Building the States phone call at 6 p.m. Pacific. We encourage you to get on this phone call and understand how you too can be a doer. Thank you. I yield.
Perspective on the world view, the globalist view of how our country is being taken over. Kathleen, would you like to talk to us about your perspective?
Over. I'm sorry. The first part of what you said was blocked out. I didn't hear you talking to me. Say that again, please. I'm sorry.
Well, I
only heard half of what you said.
Okay, we had the discussion that we had with Charles earlier about the globalists and how they've literally tried to take over our country, and I'd just like to get your perspective.
No, it's like I said. I mean, I never felt prouder than I did when I was at these world summits, and I saw the stature that this country had and enjoyed at that time. And people, the people in our country are so determined that we lose all of that, and I don't understand it. I don't understand it. I don't understand Americans who hate this country. You know, I don't understand all of this open arms thing when we're letting convicts and terrorists into this country, and I don't understand the mindset behind that. It's just something that's beyond me. And like you said, they're just determined that they're going to bring this country down, where for so long we've been really, when in history, we've been the new kids on the block, and all the old countries in Europe have been, while they wanted our money, they were also very jealous of us because of our technology, and we were so advanced, and we were such hard workers over the years, and we have advanced more than any other country in the world, but they're determined that they're going to bring us down. And I don't think I know Donald Trump's not going to let that happen. He's just not. He's going to make a lot of enemies along the way, but I think it's like tonight we're watching him. He's gone after Syria. I mean, what Syria has done is unconscionable. I mean, what's tomorrow going to bring? He's going to face an awful lot of flack for this, but I think he's doing the right thing. You know, sometimes somebody's got to take charge here. When you see the terrorists and what they're doing to countries all over the world, and in Syria where he's gassing his own countrymen and children, I mean, it's just horrible to watch. I don't know what you do with I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring for Trump after this move.
I think the one thing that most Americans are really amazed with is how closely, at least in most areas, Donald Trump has followed what his campaign pledges were, and has tried to do what he said he was going to do. And I think that's important for the discussion, because I think most people are just absolutely amazed about him.
Well, as long as people pay attention to the real news and not to the fake news, that's the problem here. I mean, that's a major problem in this country. I mean, I've seen it on my Facebook page, and people arguing and caring. I mean, it's driving people crazy. I've never seen our country as divided as it is today. Never, ever in my entire life. And not to the days of Martin Luther King and now with Cuba early on. Then, I mean, we were all together, on those things when we came right down to it. And we survived some tough times. But, I mean, this is a great country. And the people that in our country who want us to not succeed, it's just something I don't understand. I mean, I don't know why they're here. I don't understand it.
Well, I think Barack Obama, when he said he wanted to basically transform America, he was real serious about that.
Yeah,
and
he
what
tried.
he wanted to transform it into, and spent the last 8 years trying to transform it into, is not what we grew up with, not the John Wayne America that we grew up with as kids. So, Charles, I know that you're the ultimate authority on the Clinton Foundation. Would you please tell our listeners how you discovered that the Clinton Foundation is nothing much more or less than a huge slush fund for the Clintons and their cronies and friends?
Sure. So around the country, Americans, and it's actually the poorer Americans, the people who don't have securities accounts, who don't have a lot of financial or any financial wealth, the bottom 80% by income in this country, give the majority of all money away each year to charity, because we've got over 100 million households, and that's a lot of people. And, when you start adding, even if it's $100 a household, that's a lot of money. So most of us, when we, hear about, for example, these poor kids in Syria who are bombed, or there's a charity might deal with them, if it's a reputable name and there are reputable trustees associated with it, we don't think twice about giving, such a charity $20 or $100, whatever the number is. And there are a lot of American charities. There's over 1 million charities. So it turns out, and this is something I didn't know until 2 years ago, that the regulatory apparatus that exists on paper for charities is quite big. So most states, I think it's like 45 states or 46 states, actually have special rules that if you come into these states and you want to raise money, you've got to fill out forms in advance. You've got to tell the state authorities whether or not the principals of the charity have any defects in their records. You have to fill out an audit. You have to provide dog food for Kathleen.
Stop. Absolutely. Yeah, it better be good for dog food too.
No, and it can't be false and materially misleading. So the other thing you have to do is you have to set out what your purpose is. So the purpose of the Clinton Foundation, it's not, as I think I said before on your show, when you set up a charity, it's not like getting a driver's license where you walk in and you fill out forms and you answer questions and then you go and do a road test and nobody asks you to specify where you're going and what kind of car you're driving. You have to, with a charity, you have to tell the IRS in great depth where you're going to go with your authority to be federally tax exempt, and who is going to be doing the driving, what kind of a car you have, what kind of a corporation you have. It's a lot more detailed process because it's very valuable what you're getting. You're getting the ability to take in donations, offer your donors tax deductions, and then the difference between what you take in and what you spend, you can keep inside this charity and can grow and grow and grow and grow. So the U.S. government and the state governments are losing money. This charity talks about all the things, the myriad things they can do, the ridiculous names. The projects are actually, frankly, ridiculous, from global warming to fighting HIV/AIDS internationally to, redressing income inequality, all these projects that sound great. This charity was only authorized and has only legally been authorized to be a research facility and presidential archive in Little Rock, Arkansas. No other part of this charity has ever been validly authorized to do anything anywhere in the United States or anywhere around the world. That's one starting problem. The second problem is that when it solicits, as it has done around the world and across the United States, it's been lying to all the regulators about what they were authorized to do. It has not been getting the kind of, most of your listeners are familiar with what accountants do. They prepare reports. Strict reports are called audits. Charity regulators require that a charity much smaller than the Clinton Foundation and certainly as big as the Clinton Foundation has to get real audits. The Clinton Foundation, in 20 years of operations, has never procured a legally compliant audit for any part of its organization. Yet it has represented, and represents as we speak on right now in this broadcast, that it has complied with the laws, which is a bold-faced lie. And the reason they haven't been called on it, in my opinion, is that the Clintons and the Bush family have developed friendships, and basically the establishment uniparty has made a decision, I think, until now, that this is too embarrassing, too complex to admit and investigate, and they've allowed this thing to fester and get worse and worse and worse, and the Clintons have taken advantage of it.
Well, I think that's an excellent term that you use too, the uniparty, because that it doesn't seem like it used to be in the old days that the parties would actually kind of rein the other one in and keep everybody on an honest track, and that isn't really the case now.
Exactly. I mean, there's no. The one thing there's one thing when you think of this, and I'm just an amateur historian, I like history and I read about it, but you look closely at the Constitution, there's no mention in the Constitution of political parties. And indeed, the founders, George Washington in particular, hated what were called factions. They weren't called parties back then, but they were called factions. And, what's happened under Obama, and maybe arguably previous to that, is down in the swamp, has evolved this notion that when one political party takes power, the law be damned. It's all about advancing the interests of that political party and damaging the interests of the opposing political party, and that's absurd. It is not what we should allow government to be doing today. And by the way, our government spends all in about $6 trillion a year, making it alone the third largest body in the world, China being the second, our economy being the first, but the government portion would be the third largest national economy in the world, left, considered on its own. And that's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it certainly is. Kathleen, would you like to talk about what you see the deep state antics that are going on right now in the Beltway, and how best we can stop the attempts to sabotage President Trump's efforts to roll back the Marxist socialist, I'll call them globalist programs of the Obama administration, and I'd like to concentrate our last 10 or 15 minutes of the show on really what we see as a way to counteract some of these things that are going on.
I think that we should stay the course. We won the election. I don't care what the Democrats said. And the country spoke, and it spoke loudly. And because people are fed up. They're fed up with everything. They're fed up with the economy. They're fed up with immigration. They're really fed up. I mean, I have to say that since this inaugural, I have talked to more people than ever who are just downright disgusted about what's going on with this government and with these Democrats. I mean, and the things that they are accusing Trump of and fighting him tooth and nail the entire way on everything. I mean, Schumer announced yesterday that if Gorsuch is appointed, that he's going to fight every bill that comes across his desk from the White House. I mean, they're not thinking about us. This is them against the Republicans. It has nothing to do with the people in this country and what we need. I mean, we need jobs. It's just like Trump said. He's the kind of businessman who knows how to create jobs, and certainly in his world. And why can't he translate that to this country? I mean, he has the right ideas. He certainly has the experience, and it's just, I think people in this country have had it, and I think that we just have to stay conscious, and we have to, be aware. It's mostly to just be aware of, as tiresome as it is, of what's going on in Washington. We can't let them take over, and that's the thing that they're trying to do. And the thing that I think is so disheartening is the number of Republicans that have kind of jumped on that wagon. I just don't. Mm-hmm. I don't know what that is. I mean, I guess they consider themselves the true conservatives, and Trump isn't, but at least he is. I mean, as opposed to the progressives, and the progressives are just off the rail here when it comes to their programs and what they want to do to Trump, and they're going after his family. It's just like even though Trump's children, most of them, all except for Barron, are all grown adults, it's always been, as far as I've known and seen in all my years here on this earth and in politics, that presidential children are off base. Leave them alone. Well, mm-hmm. I guess the fact that Ivanka and her husband and other members of the family have played a part in his campaign and the White House, I guess that puts them on a different level. But still, I mean, they have just eviscerated this family, and it's just not right. I mean, if some of the things were said about the Obamas that are said by the Trumps, this news media would go absolutely crazy. And I think that we just have to monitor all of this and just talk to our congressmen. I mean, my two senators, Kaine and Warner, both came out against Gorsuch. I mean, and their reasoning behind it was so lame. It's like I was listening to schoolboys playing in the playground and talking about the other side, how we're going to get the other side. And their arguments are ludicrous. They're just ludicrous. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, Warner, I was so embarrassed a couple of weeks ago. He said that Hillary's event when she had that seizure and they had to pack her into the van and she lost her shoe, right. when that was, he actually has come out and said that was nothing but Russian disinformation. And I thought, so does that mean that we didn't see what we saw? I mean, really? Yeah. What does that mean by saying that? It's just a ridiculous statement. How could that be Russian disinformation when we saw the woman in a seizure-like event with our very own eyes? That's when it just gets to the point of madness. When they just when they tell you you didn't see what you thought you saw.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It's listen to what I say. Don't trust your lying eyes, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. I know. It's just. I don't know. It's beyond my comprehension. I don't know where it's going to go. It's like I said, I've never seen a country so divided. I think this summer is going to be, there's going to be a lot of trouble this summer in the cities. And
but the thing is, Kathleen, and Charles, I want you to weigh in on this too right away. But my take on it is that we have a lot more of us than there are them, and
yes.
guys like George Soros has to pay to get these people to attend these rallies and to do these so-called riots and different antics that they're involved in, because frankly, most Americans feel like we do. Charles, would you like to maybe weigh in on that too?
Sure, and I see we have less than 5 minutes left, but I think, Kathleen brought it up, and today happens to be, I think, the 100th anniversary of the start of World War I. Apparently, we've launched 50-plus missiles into Syria, not just a few, 50-plus missiles. Each one of those missiles is pretty expensive and very powerful. And so we stand now at a pivotal moment. I really hope and pray that the Trump team has done their homework carefully and considered all the many consequences of these acts. I mean, we've got the leader of China in Mar-a-Lago with Donald Trump as we speak. I think President Trump is working. I mean, a guy, he's, I guess, 70 years old almost, and, the guy works 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, it seems. I think we need to, send positive thoughts to him and his team. Hope that on behalf of our frontline service people, military service people, and the first responders and everyone else, that we're really ready for what may come next. Mm-hmm. But I applaud you, Dan, and your team for all the hard work you're doing to educate, your listeners and interact with your listeners. It's an honor to be on your show, especially so with Kathleen, who will close the broadcast by telling her favorite joke.
Okay, let's hear that.
No, wait a minute now. No, that's not fair. That's not fair. I mean, all of a sudden I'm tongue-tied. I can't think of one.
All right.
You tell your favorite joke. Yeah, I'll turn it over to you.
No, let Dan tell his.
Well, I'll tell you what I would like to say. I would like to say that in this country, one thing that we don't do nearly enough of, and I think we need to do a lot more, is to bow our heads and get on our knees and pray to the Lord that He will help our president and He will help our country and see us through. I think we really, I think He answered a prayer from a lot of Americans when President Trump was elected in November. And I think if we allow this opportunity to bring America back to the greatness and to the stature that we really should have. And I'm saying by greatness and stature, I mean the greatness and the stature of the people of our country, the greatness and the stature of the humble, honest, integrity bound people that run our country, and that has been missing for a very long time. And I think we really do have to pray for our president, and I do think that we have to pray for our country. I really am very, very tickled that you folks would agree to be on the show. Kathleen, I've heard so much about you, and very positive things about how you've stood up against the mainstream media and how they did literally tried to blister you with the sorts of nasty rhetoric and trying to, as you mentioned, try to destroy your reputation and everything about you. And that, in my mind, you are an American hero because you stood up and did the right thing. And Charles, I have a tremendous amount of respect for what you do and the fact that you're trying to expose the deceits of the Clinton Foundation, and you've had such an incredible impact on the country with the disclosures that you've already done and with the information you're turning up on a regular basis. So With that said, Charles, would you like to talk about any of the programs that you're involved in? And then I'd like to have Kathleen have the same opportunity.
I don't know how much more time we have, but
we've got a few minutes. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'm just really focused on the Clinton Foundation and on the wider web of charities beyond the Clinton Foundation that are all part of this pack. The wider charity world, the particularly multinational charities, have not been regulated. A lot of them, it turns out, I think, are slush funds, and I'll be raising the temperature under frauds like the Clinton Foundation in the coming weeks and months.
Great. Kathleen, what are your projects that you're working on?
Well, what I'd like to do is, and I've talked to Juanita about this at length. We've got to pick the right time, though, and if not now. I have researched, and I really have not found, unless it's hiding from me, but I've not found any kind of a committee or commission that is government-sponsored or government-backed addressing sexual harassment, sexual assault, rape. I mean, it's a major problem on college campuses. It's a major problem in the military. It's a major problem in the inner cities. And I think if we could get a bipartisan group in Washington together, maybe once a month, and start planning. I mean, I'm already planning the things that I want to propose to see if we can get this off the ground, because I think it's important. I mean, when you get right down to it, nothing's really changed on those subjects. It really hasn't. I think women are being listened to more than before. Before, we never would report these things. I mean, I know I've dealt with sexual harassment in the workplace a number of times since I was a young girl. And back then, I mean, I hate to date myself, but I mean, it was just that boys will be boys things and put up with it. And I always thought, that just doesn't seem right. But that's the way it was. And we're beyond that today. We should be beyond that. I mean, women have taken over. I mean, there are more women doctors. I mean, women students in medical school now. And I mean, they're across the board. And, we got women pilots or, F-15s, and it's amazing what they're doing now. I mean, that was not going on in my day. So I think that this whole thing of sexual assault and harassment and rape in the business world and in the military and on college campuses really needs to be addressed. And I think that we're in a good place where we could. I mean, I'd like to go out and speak on college campuses and speak to kids in the inner city, and go to see General Mattis and say, I mean, that there's this problem here. Let's talk about it. Let's go to military bases and talk about it. I mean, that seems to be the norm. And General Mattis does not seem like the kind of man who would put up with that kind of thing. We just need to draw attention to it. And I think that the Trump White House is really caught up right now in immigration and taxes and Obamacare and all that. That's what they're all wrapped up around. Now we've got this thing with Syria. I think this summer will be a good time to try to approach that. It's something that I really want to get going on. I think it's very important.
I think you could certainly be a tremendous spokesperson for that sort of an effort, and I applaud you for doing that. Well, with that, I hate to say it, but we're at the end of our program, and I just want to thank you both for being our guests on the show and helping our listeners to connect the dots. And I asked our listeners to come back next week and hear another great program that will help America to connect the dots. Thank you, and with that, I turn the show over to you, Kelby.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this week's show with Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. God bless. Good night. We'll see you next Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific.